It's a pleasure for me to participate in this program that has been issued jointly in the International Center for Health in Cruz for the PAHO. The purpose of this module is to reflect about the current problems about the regional governance and global governance of health. To start approaching this subject, we'll talk about a reflection on the concept of governance in health. What do we understand in governance of health? Governance of health we can understand as a set of institutions, standards, and rules of play to promote protection of its inhabitants, the health of its inhabitants. Traditionally, the governance in health is related to the national level because the countries are responsible primarily for the protection of the health of the people. However, in a global context, as we have nowadays, the problems of health and their determinants overcome the frontiers of the countries, and therefore it's important to have a regional and global governance of health. It has been built through multilateralism and is considered as a means appropriate to incide on global determinants in health. In the current process of globalization, what we see is a greater interdependence of countries, and the governments at national level are being affected exactly by this process of globalization, and the problems in health have national capabilities to give responses. Therefore, it's necessary to have a multilateral approach. And however, many times we have developed the idea that we lack the thought of thinking globally and act locally. The health problems are the opposite. If you think locally and act globally, it's the opposite. As I mentioned, the global governance in health has been built from the multilateralism. This is a set of actions and interaction negotiations through means, institutions, and procedures informally in order to influence in a political international agenda. The multilateralism involves players as the delegates of the members' countries, the representative of the countries, but little by little incorporate other players like bureaucracy of the other institutions, representative interest groups, and nowadays we have foundations or philanthropic foundations, other groups are involved exactly with this kind of diplomacy in health. What do we understand by multilateral diplomacy? This is a very useful tool to solve problems of functional instrumental problems. It is linked to great conferences that have been given in the world, linked to transportation, to trade, and have to be practical responses to the countries where they have to join efforts to obtain revenues to other countries, to the management of values, expectations, the shared well-being by the social groups that have impact and legitimate social policies. Many times these actions must allow stability to the government system and also a very interesting tool to mitigate social conflicts. The multilateral diplomacy implies an exchange of consensus to avoid conflicts, many times reaching acceptable results for all the parties of common interest. Basically, these consensus that are reached among the member states are translated what we understand as international regimes. International regimes we can define as a set of principles, guidelines, procedures for decision-making on aspects related to international relationships around which the expectation of different countries converge to. In health, we can find many ones. For example, one of the most known lately is the Nazarene ruling that was approved in 2005, and we have other international regimes like the tobacco one or one regarding the development of research and development in order how to reach international regimes that incentivize research and development in products for neglected diseases. Multilateralism in health is very old already. In 1851, as a result of an outburst of cholera in Europe that affected the maritime transportation. We generate the first international sanitarian conference in Paris. Since 1851 onwards, we have had 100 years of different conferences and meetings linked mainly to communicable disease and how they affect or can threaten the trade among countries. Basically, this multilateralism shows development according to minimum prescriptions regarding maritime quarantine in order to generate a service to the foreign commerce and navigation. Since 1851 to 1938, we have about 14 sanitary conferences. They show different types. We have the participation of hygienists, experts, ambassadors, in order to avoid the transmission of pest disease. We have the arrival of sanitary and diplomacy, as we understand nowadays, because it's a diplomacy that is combined above all profiles of sanitarians with diplomatics. These first sanitary conferences allow the harmonized quarantine measures, the measures of how to contemplate possible cases of diseases brought by ships, and basically to facilitate agreements on the need of an institution to maintain and present data about epidemiology and responses facing an epidemics of public health. This has been evolved. In 1946, after the war, we have the creation of WHO. This WHO creation started with a cooperation between the United States and the Soviet Union, basically, where they wanted to reconstruct sanitary system of the countries that had been devastated by the war. And exactly this devastation of the sanitary systems brought the possibility of dissemination of some diseases, of communicable diseases. So the basic intention was to create an independent institution where the decisions of other international agencies would reinforce the discovery between medical knowledge and the requirement of public health, including the greater amount of countries apart from any kind of political guidelines. In the creation of the WHO, we see an influence of social medicine that highlights the importance of social factors and political and cultural factors in the recurrence of epidemiological diseases. If we analyze the preamble of the Constitution of WHO, we see an interesting idea that is health understood as a fundamental right of human beings, and also the idea of the health being a responsibility of the governments and a right of the citizen without any distinction of race, creeds, and any other interest. Something that is very implicit in the creation of WHO was that many of the problems of health could only be solved in a global scale, understanding that the rich countries should cooperate and help the poorer countries to overcome the problems. Currently, you can see that the origin of this WHO only participate about 26 countries, and this process increased, and nowadays WHO is integrated by all the member states of the United Nations that are 194 countries. You know that the home office of WHO is in Geneva, and it is an organization that is decentralized, where we have regional offices. We have Africa, America, Southeast Asia, Europe, Mediterranean, and Western Pacific. These regional offices work in a decentralized way, and many times they reproduce governance mechanisms specific to each of the regions, but all of them in a specific way are articulated and with the WHO, that is maximum body of governance. The Assembly is meeting generally in May of each year and establish the general policies of the organization and adopt recommendations and decisions, establish a general working plan that establishes the main objectives and aims that the WHO has to intervene in health in all the countries. Another body of governance is the Executive Council. It's a council that is integrated by 34 state member countries with sanitary competence that are divided by land representation. Each of the regions of the world has a specific amount of vacancies in the executive board of the WHO. Executive Council understands the agenda and proposes resolutions for same. This Executive Council proposes to the WHO General Assembly the General Director that will coordinate and lead the WHO for the period of 5 years. On the other hand, we have the Secretariat, that is, the Secretariat of the organization would be basically the employees at about 7,000 employees in the whole world, and they're led by the General Director, and she implements the policies defined by the Assembly, shares adopted decision recommendations, and exactly implements and makes it possible. The working plan has been approved by the WHO Assembly. As I mentioned recently, the working plan of WHO defines a priority for the compliance of its functions and proposes a strategic vision for the organization for the next 6 years. Currently, the general working plan in course is from 2014 to 2019 and shows the 3 components that came from the reform of WHO, defining programs and priorities, governance, and vision. The general program working plan shows the leadership for key areas where they will act and will have intervention, and also has an influence in the worldwide health and the way of work at the different levels of the Secretariat and among themselves. And also this working plan establishes a governance by the member countries, and directive role coordinates exactly WHO with the other players linked to the global governance of health. This general working plan establishes a chain of results that exactly explains how the organization will reach specific targets and impacts on the population. It also allows account rendering for the member countries to see how WHO has reached their objectives. As I was mentioning, the general working plan that is in course is from 2014 to 2019, and 6 main priorities. The first one is linked to the objective of the Millennium Development, linked to health through, since the signature of the Millennium Declaration, WHO has been the agency has followed the development of all this and has tried to cooperate with the countries in order to eliminate the gaps in reaching these objectives. And the second priority that the WHO has is the sanitary global coverage, that all citizens can have access to health assistance of integral quality. And the third priority is linked to that all the countries strengthen their capabilities to implement the Sanitary International Regulation. In 2005, this has been approved, and this regulation states the procedures or the guidelines that have to be followed whenever international public problem in health, and this is stated to overcome the old-fashioned idea of quarantine, but an organized scenario where the merchandise are permanently going from one country to the other. We have to have new procedures to use in order to detect possible events of public health of international impact and how to avoid transmission and how to proceed considering this problem. In this sense, the ruling has been approved, and all the countries have capability sufficiently to implement this, or the WHO covers this and cooperates with the countries to make this happen. The fourth priority of WHO has access to medical products. WHO is plainly conscious and aware they cannot ensure health if they cannot ensure the access to the cure or to the drugs or other strategic inputs that are essential, but they develop other activities linked to the access of population to drugs by means of procurements in scale by the countries or strategies to facilitate access to the drugs by other countries. Another priority has to do with the social determinants of health, trying to reach some recommendations that were given in the worldwide conference. And the sixth priority has to do with the chronic non-communicable diseases due to the high importance that they have on the load of diseases. And this has had a lot of incidence in the incorporation of this priority of the leadership of WHO at the Special Assembly of the United Nations for Non-Communicable Diseases that took part in New York in 2012. And this is determined that WHO should incorporate very strongly the subject of a strategy and a worldwide plan for non-communicable diseases. Basically speaking, in this slide that we're showing you, we have the subject of general working plan where we state 8 strategic objectives of impact that WHO wants to reach. The first one has to do with reduction mortality of children under 5 years old. The second one has to do with the reduction of mortality of motherhood. And third, reduce the number of cases of deaths regarding HIV and AIDS, TB and malaria, and also reduce mortality due to chronic non-communicable diseases that many times are the main cause or has an important weight on the load of the diseases. Regarding mortality, eradicate polio as one of the great challenges also, and also eradicate tuberculosis, and also avoid mortality, diseases, and other emergencies. So WHO has a great intervention and has also been considered through many emergency situations in public health. Has a lot of intervention regarding risk mitigation facing emergencies and catastrophes. And the last objectives of impact is reduce mortality of children under 5 years in rural and urban zones, trying to diminish the gap exactly between those two populations. How do we fund the WHO? WHO is funded by the contribution of the countries. These are the contributions that are regular. However, if we analyze nowadays the budget of WHO, these normal contributions represent 23% of the budget of WHO. So you would ask yourselves, so where does the rest of the resources come from? They come from volunteer contributions or specific programs that give donors about 77%. Donors, that includes can be donors from the private sector that come with specific financial or specific programs directed without any part of interference from the countries. This exactly brings a debate about these resources, and many countries in some opportunities have mentioned the fact that these donations should also pass through the General Assembly of the WHO, and the country should define the priority in the assignment of the resources. Here we have a very great and deep discussion, and exactly in the framework of the process of WHO is stating that how to redefine the relationship with the private sector. Also, we have to, as they share the budgets in different regions, Africa, America, Southwest Asia, Europe, Eastern Mediterranean, and Western Pacific, and its own home office. And the pie chart shows here how many the country that receives more cooperation and help from WHO is Africa. In fact, the region of the Americas also appears with little relevance regarding this resource is 4.4% of the general budget of WHO, comes to the Americas. And here we have had during the last General Assemblies in health some kind of discussion in the bloc of the Americas, because aside of being a very low budget for the Americas, what is budgeted very little reaches Americas. There is a problem called what is budgeted and what really reaches the region. And what draws our attention in the graph that we see here, it's not very, the colors are very similar. The percentage goes to Africa and the Home Office. So the General Director of the organization had 33% of the budget that appears available under her own discretion. So these funds are the funds that are used many times for emergencies and for different contingencies. But what we have to highlight are funds that the General Director has autonomy for its execution. 63rd General Assembly for Health, we had a discussion that was very interesting. It was in 2010 because the General Director of WHO made a call for the countries to contribute more. And we had an interesting situation where many countries started asking the director why she wanted these funds for, and if it was to do the same. And then we had exactly process of reforms that originated in 2010 and continued until 2014 to reform the WHO. Basically, in the same words of the General Director of WHO, WHO nowadays, considering the incorporation of many areas within the public health, and also considering this evolution of health since the time of its creation that basically had to do with communicable diseases, now incorporate other subjects. One of the results is WHO is overloaded with functions and tasks, and many times it's not able to respond very briefly to the global health challenges. A result of this lack of briefness, agility, basically we have seen a loss of leadership of WHO at the level of global health and a growth participation of some philanthropic foundations of the private sector, like, for example, Bill and Melinda Gates, Rockefeller Foundation, and different other foundations nowadays act basically in the field of global health.
Well, namely, this reform process of the WHO gained momentum in 2010. Still, we can say this reform process actually has come from 1992. The Executive Council of WHO called upon a working group. The idea was the adaptation of WHO to the big changes in the world and the current challenges of global health. Exactly, this working group formulated 47 recommendations on the reform process, especially that were linked to financing and were related to the funds and the or the public-private partnerships. This process, reform process in 2010, revisits its intensity and raises reinforcing leadership and governance in global health by WHO. And how can WHO have better articulation together with the different players at sectorial or extra-sectorial level in order to recover and extend the expectations of the member states? Well, basically, this process was translated into 24 documents, also in the 64 to the 67 Assembly, 2010 until 2014. And modifications are raised that had to do exactly with the with trying to overcome or generate reforms so the WHO can better fulfill its mission, prioritizing selectively and defining strategic objectives that has been translated in the strategic working plan. The definition, the clear definition of what is the role of PAHO in global health, trying to identify which are the challenges that should be posed on WHO in the current days. We've seen the implementation of a series of reforms linked to governance mechanisms, to the priorities established. There's still a perception in some players of global health or even the member states that this reform has had a more cosmetic nature than substantive nature. I would say also that today we do have a global governance in health and regional governance in health. Also, we link it to PAHO at regional level, as I told you before, is the regional office for WHO. It's kind of funny, because the World Health Organization is newer than PAHO that was created in 1902. In the region of the Americas, let's say, the concern for fighting diseases that went beyond borders actually pre-existed in 1902, exactly vis-a-vis an epidemic of yellow fever that had been disseminated throughout maritime trade. The first Pan-American Sanitary Convention was held at the countries of the region, created in a meeting in Washington, the Pan-American Sanitary Office, that exactly would be dedicated to compiling data or researching the health conditions out and also oversee public health in the countries for the elimination of the diseases. And well, basically the idea of incorporating actually sanitation measures in ports. Well, basically, the main idea is the vectorial control can generate externalities to all countries and mutual benefits. So this Pan-American Public Health Organization runs to advance in the development of measures. This was advancing in time, and in the Pan-American Conference held in Cuba, I think it was the 7th Pan-American Sanitary Conference held in Cuba, we saw the creation of an American Code, which is a landmark of international health because it oversees the health of all the countries of the territory, raising also prevention and international propagation of infections of diseases susceptible of being transmitted to humans, the whole idea of stimulating adoption cooperation measures to avoid introduction propagation of diseases, the idea of uniforming the collection of statistic data related to morbidity and mortality, the idea of stimulating the exchange of reports that can be valuable in order to improve public health and fight diseases, and the whole idea of having actually uniformity actually in the elimination of all barriers that could impact in international trade. Well, basically, the PAHO we mentioned and we also stated as being the first body of international health that has existed in the world, and basically the whole idea that is raised is actually joining efforts also that everybody can cooperate together to eradicate diseases as a goal. Well, since that time on, of when the Pan-American Public Health Office has been created, a long time has gone by. In 1946, when the inception of WHO, the Pan-American organization starts to act as the regional office for the Americas, and later in the 50s, PAHO is a specialized organization of the Inter-American System of OAS for public health in the region. Well, basically, today we have 35 members, full members, and then we have observing states that are observers, Portugal and Spain. At the same time, we have other observers that can be territories that do participate in WHO. Actually, UNASO, which is a territory that participates with a voice but has no vote. Today, the bodies of PAHO are three, basically, in terms of governance, with the supreme body of government is the Pan-American Public Health Conference. Then we have the Pan-American Public Health Conference meets every 5 years. Then we have the Executive Council. It will be the working group of the Pan-American Conference is made up by 9 countries that have a 3-year mandate within the council with the committee, and they alternate. And the Pan-American office that is headed by the director, currently of the director, which is a lady, and the secretary comes below. For the idea of trying to align cooperation of the Pan-American Health Organization and all the partners in terms of cooperation for development, the countries of the Americas have decided for the creation or the preparation of a health agenda for the Americas. This instrument that has a political weight has allowed exactly for the orientation of all those cooperating cooperants to contribute to improving the public health in the region, providing a framework for its purpose. This health agenda of the Americas was a participatory process prepared by the member states of PAHO, and basically they worked on preparing a document on the values of solidarity amongst countries, on the values of trying to care for the public health needs of our peoples, and work also together. They making a document that align cooperation by all partners for the region. Well, this health agenda of the region has eight lines of action. The first one has to do with the strengthening of the public health authority, the idea of the strengthening actual public health, so that the health authority would be the big maestro that would guide the efforts of the health systems in the countries. Then the second pillar has to do with the approach of determinants in health. I would like to stress the health agenda of the Americas was approved in 2008. And PAHO was a pioneer in the sense of trying to establish or prioritizing strategies to approach health determinants, prioritizing the approaches of determining factors. Third line of action has to do with the issue of harnessing actual science and technology knowledge. Exactly the whole idea of trying to make available, to be able to give access to information to science and technology by all member states, understanding actually at a regional public good. The fourth line of action has to do with the issue of strengthening solidarity and food security, in the sense that trying to advance in eliminating the level of malnutrition, child malnutrition, of all the players in the region. The fifth line of action has to do with the reduction of inequalities in health within and between countries. Well, basically, the whole idea of trying to advance in this region, because we have seen in the last years an increase, significant increase of the life expectancy or improvement of all the public health indicators. We can still perceive big gaps in the health status and the population between several richer and poorer countries, and at the same time within the same countries. The sixth line of action has to do with reducing risk and the burden of the disease. The seventh one has to do with the whole issue of the increase of social protection and access to quality health services, exactly raising the strengthening of services and health systems for the region. And the fourth line of action has to do with the strengthening of management development of people who work in the health area, understanding the health sector is labor incentive. Understand the health sector, most of the decision are due to decisions of human resources of the people who work in that area. That then it is necessary to strengthen actually development and management. This process of the health agenda of the Americas was approved in 2008 until 2016. In 2012, we saw the preparation of the evaluation, the evaluation that was made, this evaluation that was prepared by the countries. Also, significant progress made in the 8 lines of action. Despite all of this, what called the attention on the recommendations that were made, especially what called our attention had to do with the lack of knowledge that some international organizations had of this agenda, or be it a partial use made by some sub-regional, regional integration bodies made of like UNASUR, Mercosur. So one of the key recommendations that was raised in this evaluation was to make better use of it. On the other hand, the evaluation of the 8 lines of actions was made based on proxy indicators. What we were able to observe is actually a good evolution of indicators. This well called some attention, some indicators like the increase of the case of dengue, the increase of cases of TB, or HIV. Malaria also increased. And other issue that was troublesome was the little reduction of out-of-pocket expenditures in health, reduction of maternal mortality was not achieved as expected. This brings a challenge for all of us who work in these different international organizations' offices in the country, exactly in order to be strengthening the efforts made in order for the appropriation of this agenda. This agenda should be translated into national policies in order to cooperate with other players or key partners in order to try to deepen these objectives or lines of action, if you will. At the same time, Pan American Health Organization has been basing itself in this agenda for the preparation of the strategic plan. The strategic plan would be the general working plan, be it as a maximum instrument for planification, introduce strategic guidelines of the organization based on collective priorities by the member states and is specific to the results that are to be achieved. Basically, once again, the strategic plan of PAHO is articulated with the general working plan of WHO, but prioritizes some issues like the ones that emerge from the health agenda of the Americas, or linked to the cooperation strategies of the countries, prioritizing certain topics that are to be deepened or perfected at a regional level. At a national level, basically, the strategic plan is designed with 9 areas of key guidelines that have to do with improving health and well-being, with equity. The newborns and children under 1 year should start their life in a healthy manner, guarantee a maternity without risk, reducing mortality due to the low quality of medical care, improving the health of the adult population, stressing chronic non-communicable diseases and risk factors, reducing mortality for communicable chronic diseases, decrease this type of mortality and accidents, eliminating communicable diseases and avoiding disabilities because of the emergency situations. The way how we can dynamize this strategic plan is through different types of biannual budgets. The budget for PAHO, just like the WHO budget, is made up by different regular contributions or contributions made by the countries that are established according to a criteria or scales established by the OAS. The different contributions or the resources transferred from WHO to PAHO, which is 4.4% that comes from the budget at global level, and it comes from voluntary contributions or donations that, just like WHO, is received at PAHO. Well, basically, the problems in regards to these voluntary contributions are just very similar to the problems of WHO, because countries cannot prioritize the allocation of these resources. These funds come actually for programs, for activities, without any interference by the boards of the Pan American Health Organization. Well, but namely, again, the level of these voluntary contributions are of different natures. We have contributions of different agencies from the countries, and we have until the contributions made by foundations and from the private sector itself. In the chart that we see here, you see the current budget in 2016-2017 has $198.2 million that is a contribution made by PAHO. 25 million actually from WHO. These are revenues that come from different activities held by PAHO. The voluntary contributions are 211 million, and the allocations that are transferred by WHO to the Americas are $178 million. In all, the budgets are $612.8 million. These resources are distributed, are assigned by the strategic plan, and the strategic plan and the biannual budgets have prioritized some countries that are in which PAHO is going to be prioritizing cooperation at the same time as prioritize the strategic guidelines that we commented upon before. Well, basically, once again, what we try to introduce to you as of actually our presentation is that the governance in global health and regional health implies the international negotiations that fall under the umbrella of these both organizations, WHO and PAHO. These negotiation processes are on multiple levels and multiple players. These processes actually manage and crystallize the global policies for health. What can be observed since the creation of WHO until today is a number of agreements that are binding. Their mandatory compliance by the countries is very low. Most of these resolutions at global level and at Pan American level are regulations or resolutions that suggest the countries or encourages the country to be able to comply with the power WHO actually a binding nature is very low and is reduced based only to international public health regulation and the Tobacco Framework Convention. This is an area that, as of governance, from multilateral diplomacy in health could be developed and deepened, exactly as of the consensus reached with all countries. In the last years, the perception of the risk on public health that can be submitted to global and regional governance have been extended, raising exactly the need for a diplomacy in health through international legal frameworks. Diplomacy today raises exactly the need of operating within a multipolar world, within multi-level policies involving basically not only the regional level, but the regional level too. In this process is what we can see the diplomacy not only carried out by diplomats, but involves many times, or almost most of the times, it involves actually the cadre, actually also the representatives of the ministries. And it is necessary that all together we should be trained into shared learning process in order to strengthen the capacities of the ministries of health. Basically, what we can see in this, from the creation, from the first Pan-American conferences of the first global health conferences, we can see how diplomacy actually was dedicated only to the bilateral vision to advance in a multilateral dimension and of a relationship between players, government players, that today incorporates governmental actors to the bureaucracies of international organizations, but also establishes relationships with other players like philanthropic foundations and different organizations. Well, the other thing that it can be observed in this development, we see the extension of the institutions and instruments, and many times decisions linked to governance in health involve the sectorial institutions and other institutions as well. These issues exactly will be seen in next module, which is module number 4. Thank you very much.